with tokenized assets, everyone gives this data in different formats and different time
Yes,
intervals on different chains, and
exactly.
it's just a mess and a half.
Different
So
standard.
there are no standards, and so that's something we're trying to standardize a bit.
Out of all these assets that you are seeing day to day, which asset class do you feel is the loudest signal that tokenization has crossed from theory to practical? Which is shouting that, okay, tokenization is inevitable.
It's just been a variety. Like I said, kind of hard to know who I can exactly share on, but what we do see at the end of the day is just business getting done, people having genuine conversations, decision makers being present and active, and that's something we're really proud of, and we just want to keep on growing the opportunity for.
But there is one step missing still, which I would like for you to, even try to break down in plain English. But what if someone wants to tokenize securities? Can you break it down into some easy explanations for the audience? Hey Jason, nice to have you today at What Are You Tokenizing? How are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Harman.
I'm really glad to connect with you, and I know, the wealth of experience that you bring and the kind of work that you have been doing. I would love for the audience to understand. But before we start, where are you calling from today?
Yeah, usually we're based out of Miami. I'm in Chicago right now, so slightly colder.
Amazing, amazing. So, Jason, obviously, I went through your profile. I saw the work that you have been doing in STM, and spearheading the world's largest security token data hub. That's amazing. But before I get into the details of what you are doing right now and the kind of impact that you are creating in the tokenization world, and a lot of curious questions that I have in my mind, I would love for you to share a brief intro about yourself and your past experiences with our audience.
More than happy to. Yeah. So I started out really in consulting, helping different businesses from early stage figure out maybe their business plans or reviewing it, see what fits best. And then we had established businesses as well that needed to pivot a little bit. Maybe something wasn't working. And so it was really cool to have an experience seeing businesses from across different industries. Did about 50 to 100 of those. And then shifted over to do wealth management at a bank. And at the same time was also, learning the tokenization space before, just right before the bank. I had started also helping out at STM .co and learning, like I said, tokenization and kind of how it applies. So yeah, we'll think of it as, consulting, banking, and then a full-time STM.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. So I'm sure when you were consulting, there might have been a lot of great use cases that you might have come across, and this is something that's now coming in trend. People who have consulted companies before, they are only helping them transition to Web3 because those people understand the nuances of those industries, and they are better able to guide those traditional industries into the Web3 realm. So amazing. While we are on that topic, so I know you have been working in the Wall Street wealth management. That's a great industry. I'll say many people stay there for their lifetime, but you shifted towards tokenization, bringing capital on chain. What was that moment when you decided to, shift from Wall Street towards tokenization? What convinced you?
Great question. Yeah, I mean, it's honestly, it was just the how hard it was to handle some clients' requests, honestly, especially when they want to invest into alternatives and or even just rebalancing portfolios has a lot of steps involved. And as I was learning tokenization, how fast the atomic swaps happen, or how fast you can move an asset and automatically
Yeah.
change the ownership, that really sparked a light in me. I was like, okay, there's no way where this technology does not apply to traditional capital markets. And granted, back then it was 2020, 2021, maybe, when I decided to make that switch. And so it was, I don't know, it was a leap of faith, if you will, but I'm glad that I did. I got proven right a few years later when JP Morgan and Apollo came out with their Project Guardian initiative and proving that you can have, if you have 100,000 portfolios that you have to rebalance for your clients, it'll take about 3,000 steps. Now with tokenization, they really brought it down to a few clicks of a button, which is phenomenal. Cash drag is also reduced as well because of that, which allows for more capital to be deployed and earn yield and so forth. And happy to give more details, but like I said, it was just that aha moment. I was like, yes, this has to happen, and thank God it did, and got proven right later on.
Definitely, I think most of us that chose this industry, we are in this era of ours now. We can see that, okay, we have been proven right. It was a good decision. It was a good leap of faith, as you rightly said it. I started back in 2019 as just a developer in Web3. And at that time, the city that I am in, they had no experience, no understanding of what blockchain is. And I know it's a cliche, but it actually was something I faced. That whenever I said I'll want to learn blockchain and get into blockchain, people used to say, don't gamble with Bitcoin. That was something I faced regularly. Now people use it too often as a phrase to educate people, but I actually face that a lot. And I know that, how difficult it is to take a leap of faith, especially when a person like you is already working in Wall Street, and what's a dream for most people, you're already working there, but still take that leap of faith. That's commendable, really. And
Honestly,
I,
I just want to give a quick shout out on that point to my CEO Herwig, because he started this back in 2017, even before I joined in. Right, like he started this whole thing and security token advisor, security token market, consulting. One of the first security token offerings. So it's just even more vision there.
100%. We had a separate discussion with Harvik as well, and I got to know about that experience. I'm really glad that he you share that kind of vision, and it's a strong team building STM. No wonder it's doing wonders in the market, right? So amazing, amazing. And one thing that you mentioned really struck me. JP Morgan, building assets on chain. I think it's too fresh of a news. Just 1 hour before our podcast, I saw another news that JP Morgan has finally decided to shift everything on chain as well. They have done their pilots and they're now planning. So great times ahead. But so I understand Wall Street was just one part of your experience. You also had some other amazing work experiences that would have and are currently putting a lot of value into what you are doing in the tokenized market. I'm specifically hinting towards your days at Bank of America. So again, if it's something that you can answer openly, what were the pain points that you saw in the archaic system, so to say, that most investors and most family offices and other such clients would look into when they want to explore tokenization? What were those pain points which makes people move towards tokenization, please?
Yeah, I mean, when I was at the bank, I mean, it wasn't really so much the investors themselves seeing these pain points. It was really the back and middle office of the bank handling investor requests. So, for example, and granted, just for more context, I was a financial advisor, so really a little bit more on the client-facing side and prospecting and stuff like that. But you do have the side of the business that does have to execute the actual trades and whatnot, and so just conversing with them and so forth. But to give you kind of paint a picture, if you will, if you want to do a transfer, sometimes you have to collect information from investors, and it's a lot of or other parts of the bank, and it's a lot of back and forth, a lot of emails. You're waiting on people. It could take weeks to complete a transfer, which is ridiculous. And again, some of it's compliance, and I understand, but again, a lot of it just can be streamlined and just access to information. Not to mention just the record of ownership, of course, can be a lot faster, and that's a lot of what we see in tokenization today. But yeah, it was very time consuming, very hands on. Some banks, from what I know, just have even different segments of the bank that don't even talk to each other very well, which is a whole other problem, right? And so that's just access of information, data integrity. Because what we also know is that a lot of banks just run on Excel spreadsheets. Honestly, a lot of
Yes.
institutions are still on Excels and PDFs, and it's ridiculous because you think about the quadrillions of dollars or worth of assets that live on just exist right worldwide, and to think that the financial rails that they run on are so old and are susceptible to mistakes is just insane. So that's why blockchain makes a lot of sense. And now, fast forward years where to answer your question on maybe investors and whatnot, and more the client side, obviously, to your point, Bitcoin is the first thing that people kind of started understanding and people started wanting exposure, which is why now you see the crypto Bitcoin, the Bitcoin spot ETFs and the other sorts, right? That have a financial wrapper that they're used to that also gives exposure to that. And of course, we're seeing that evolve more where people also want just direct ownership as well. But that's just one example.
No, absolutely. And as you rightly said, that's just one example. When you were saying these things and mentioning, people are still maintaining Excel sheets, there's still the financial industry, which is still way ahead of other industries. What I'm talking about is, so a couple of years back, I was helping a agri-tech client who was building a blockchain-based solution for agriculture commodities, and I brought them to a small city in Punjab, which is in North India. And we went to the government department where this commodity trade used to happen, where the procurement happened. They are not even using Excel sheets, they are still using handwritten databases. And that was a
Yeah.
small city,
Wow.
right? So a lot of India has digitalized already, right? It's reached in many places, And this was a small city, maybe a tier 3, tier 4 city, right? But the fact is that they were still writing it down every day. It's so easy to manipulate. Like, obviously excels are also easy to manipulate, but this is another level of manipulation that can happen here, right? And makes one wonder what kind of transformation we are expecting, especially from tokenization. So as you rightly said, this was just one example, many such assets that are there. And that brings me to my next question as well. So I know I saw security token markets and what they are doing. It's almost 70 billion of market cap that you're tracking, which is huge, which is not easy at all, and across 800 plus tokenized assets. Amazing. Again, kudos to that. So I'm sure there's a lot of algorithm working in the back end. But out of all these assets that you are seeing day to day, which asset class do you feel is the loudest signal that tokenization has crossed from theory to practical, right? Which is shouting that, okay, tokenization is inevitable.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's no secret at this point that stable coins have really proven the model here. It's tokenized cash at the end of the day, followed by tokenized treasury products like your liquidity funds and treasury funds. You know, we've seen BlackRock's BIDL, Ondo's OUSG, which today announced they were did a first transaction with JP Morgan's Connexus, which is interesting that we brought that up earlier, I think.
Yep, yep, yep.
So, but anyways, these two I think are the headliners right now because again they're not as sexy as other asset classes because you know they're just standard 4 to 5% yield, etc. But what it does is that it's helped institutions get their hands dirty and get hands on with tokenization with blockchain and low risk type asset. But the other reason too is because stable coins are backed a lot of times by treasuries, right? And so if you can have the treasuries also on chain, it provides a lot more transparency and accessibility to understand, what's backing these assets and the larger picture of what we're going towards is tokenizing is just the first part. It's the easy part, actually. What else can you do with it? Aside from the rest of the value chain that we talked about earlier with the back and middle office, you also can add value and utility to some of these assets. So, for example, you're seeing tokenized treasuries and products like that, for example, like BIDL, being used for posting margin on a derivatives trade. And it's like, great, that's awesome. Like, why would you want to liquidate out of a money market fund, post the cash margin, then get it back, then put it back into the money market fund? A, that takes time. B, you're losing yield in that
Yep.
time frame where you could just be earning the yield and using it for its purpose in the meantime. So that's just again one example of why you're adding utility. And so to see this also growing and expand to other asset classes, especially up the risk curve, it's only going to keep growing from there. But to answer your question, I think stable coins and yield coins are probably the two headliners right now and front runners of like finding product market fit.
Absolutely. And this also makes a lot of sense because in the past we have seen Tether facing these kind of challenges that they have to prove their reserves. And at the same time, when Europe compliance kicks in and they are removing stablecoins which cannot prove their reserves, this is something that actually adds value to that whole ecosystem. It builds more trust and transparency, which adds on to more use cases, as you rightly mentioned. And really amazing to see that inside. So I believe that the audience will definitely be able to understand how this is moving forward. But there is one step missing still, which I would like for you to even try to break down in plain English. I know it's very difficult, there are a lot of jargons and a lot of complexities involved, but what if someone wants to tokenize securities? Can you break it down into some easy explanations for the audience?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to remember is that tokenizing an asset is not going to be a magic wand and all of a sudden investors show up. Like, no.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, these are still, to your point, securities. They're still backed by the underlying asset. And so you have to treat it as such. They are securities, right? So first and foremost is structure and legal. You want to make sure, if you're in the US especially, you want to make sure you're filing the right exemptions or doing a full registration. We've seen both. But figuring out what that structure is and how creative you want to get with the token, whether it's revenue share, profit share after a certain amount. If you want things to fully live on chain, you want connected data to it, whatever the case is, but figuring out that structure. And then, of course, it's selecting the right people to work with. As I mentioned, anyone can really tokenize. It's not that hard. What you might want to look for in a service provider is, well, what other pieces of the puzzle do they fulfill? And by that, I mean, are they, at least in the US, but again, as it relates to other jurisdictions as well, are they licensed as either a transfer agent, broker dealer, both, whatever you may need? Again, not legal advice, consult your lawyers. But are they licensed? Can they effectively issue these tokens? And also claw them back if needed. Say an investor loses their keys to their wallet, unlike crypto where you're likely going to just lose it all. In securities, you still want to have that record of ownership to be able to burn those tokens, remint them over to the new wallet of that investor, for example. So you want to have the right players in place. But of course, on the flip side, what kind of investors are you targeting? Are you targeting retail? Are you targeting accredited? Both? Do you want the whole tokenization process to live under your brand and you're in the back end, you're kind of using other service providers, essentially white labeling? Or do you not care and you'd rather have just everything under one roof, and it's okay that it's on that service provider's web page and platform regardless, and maybe they have value added because of distribution and so forth. So again, all questions that every issuer has to answer. We help a lot of people do that through security token advisors, but really it's thinking about the intricacies there and who works well with each other and so forth. To summarize it up, it's legal and structuring, it's selecting the right people to work with, and then of course your go-to-market strategy. You want to market these offerings again within legal bounds and whatever restrictions apply, but figuring out the right lingo to use. And I think something that a lot of people mistakenly do is they really focus on blockchain and the technology, and it's like ERC whatever. It's like, no, that's way too much information. Think about the investor, and this goes back to again the point of it's the underlying asset. So tell the investor what it is they're investing into. Maybe you highlight the benefits that they're going to get, like whether it's liquidity or collateral, man, whatever it is. Highlight the benefits, but you don't necessarily have to go right into the technicals. That's too much information. At the end of the day, the investor just needs to know what they're investing into and how easy it is to do.
Exactly, and that's the biggest mistake that's been going around in the market, right? So if I invest in, let's say, Coinbase today, I don't have to know what Coinbase is doing on the back end, right? I just have to know it's secure and something that I can access easily if I'm just a normal investor and normal client for them, right? And similarly, that's the mistake that people have been doing in blockchain, trying to explain too much into tokenization. But I think that fits really well with your description. And this is the kind of information we don't get through ChatGPT, right? That's where actual people and actual human being and with experience need to be there. Because I can relate from an experience. I was helping a client tokenize some assets. We went to a few service providers, and then later on we found out that we haven't even considered a proper KYC procedure, which is going to cost a lot if you're not doing in house. Then we have to pay so much in KYC that we are not able to generate enough profit to sustain that business. So many details inside. The process seems easier, but the journey is definitely very difficult. Not difficult, I'll say it takes a lot of time and needs the right guidance, as you rightly mentioned with the 3 points. Amazing. So this brings me to the next question and relates very well. So I know for a fact what STM has been doing and what, the kind of services that they've been giving to the RWA community with the DAO and all the decentralized governance as well. But still, I would like for you to share a brief about what's the difference or what's the USP that STM brings to people, which people cannot find on, let's say, Bloomberg or CoinMarketCap. What's the unique vantage point that you have?
Yeah, it's multiple, and to your point, by the way, it makes total sense why you kind of need that guiding hand along the way. I think that's also reflective in STM.co as a platform to answer your question, right? Because we you're going to find some of those assets also tracked on your Bloombergs now, and you start seeing it a little bit more on the high profile assets. But really, what sets STM apart is that we do track public blockchain issued assets, like things on Ethereum, Solana, anything like that. But we also provide visibility into asset level data, reference level data, right? So finding the right filings, making sure that if there's ratings linking out to them, if there's something to do with like a piece of real estate in their latest appraisal or the NAV of a fund, you can see those on stm.co as well. But the other side to it too is private permissioned blockchains and data and assets that are tokenized there. I think a lot of people kind of oversee those a little bit because there's no direct visibility into them. Those are relationships that we're growing continuously and starting to talk about integrations with some of these institutions to provide visibility. And by that, I mean, for example, JP Morgan Connexus, right, has, and others, have been some go-to examples, but no one has really been able to see directly into what's going on. And that's something that we want to do for the community. So onboarding those assets to stm.co. But for now, in the meantime, what you can see is about $30 billion worth of tokenized debt, which has been largely been institutionally issued. And so, maybe we're not directly plugged in, but what you can see is at least you can see how much was issued, who was involved, the terms of the bond, stuff like that, and just be aware that that exists. And of course, as we make those integrations, you can go ahead and see more details. But it's a starting point. So STM really, we're tracking pretty much every asset class under the sun. If it's an asset, investable asset that's on chain, we track it. And so we just try to provide as much visibility for our users as well.
Amazing. And when you were saying all this, something just came to my mind. This is what actually started this decentralized movement, right? When we go back to 2008 and the economic crisis and all the overused examples, this is exactly what was needed. And where we are now, I think that's where it was meant to be. Like we could track the assets, we could see where they are being used rather than just being inflated as an asset, and without going much into detailing that. But so, as you mentioned, you are tracking all these assets. While it's astonishing to see you are tracking so many assets across different chains, how do you manage that? I can't imagine. Even algorithms, we keep on building new algorithms. What's actually happening behind the hood? Like, let's say if I have to pinpoint the question, what's the, like, I'm not even able to pinpoint the question as well here. So how do you manage these
Of
assets?
course.
Please.
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot that goes into it. We have multiple data sources that we plug into or extract from. The multi-chain, we work with aggregators and ourselves to, plugging into them. I think, but taking a step back though, just to give some context, the reason why your public assets, public equities are so easy to track is like they're all standardized. The data is pretty standardized at this point. So kind of easy for anyone to kind of get visibility into that. Whereas with tokenized assets, everyone gives us data in different formats, in different time
Yes,
intervals, on different chains, and
exactly.
it's just a mess and a half.
Different
So
standards. Yeah.
there are no standards, and so that's something we're trying to standardize a bit. But in the meantime, as we onboard them, we do try to clean it up as much as possible before we display it on the front end of the website. And so to kind of elaborate on the different sources, we have of course the blockchain that we plug into, of course, and to extract from. Then you have the issuer themselves if we want to interact with them and verify some information or make sure that we get the details right on the offering, as well as the platform that the issuance is hosted on or traded on. So it's the platforms, the issuers, the blockchains, looking at the SEC Edgar database and see if the filing is there, and if it is, if we can link out to it. Um, Eventually, we'll be plugging into a lot more DeFi as well, such as vaults and so forth, because we also believe that those are going to be big in the tokenization space, and there's valuable data there on how these assets are being used. But it's just a grind, man. It's a grind of aggregation, of understanding the intricacies. Not every token is created equal, so we want to make sure that again we're standardizing that as much as possible and cleaning it up so that when you see it on stm.co, then it's standardized. You're good to go.
Amazing, amazing. That's definitely huge. That's the kind of work that makes a company big, and I'm sure that's the core behind why HCM is doing such great work. And while you were mentioning this, definitely a huge part of this is the education that you have been doing, educating people about the different standards. When I say different standards, I automatically mean that no standards are there. Everyone has their own standard to follow, and it becomes too difficult to aggregate that data. And I could see your challenges that you face. Definitely, I think that's why you have these initiatives, the newsletter that you have, the podcast that you are doing, and the events that you are doing to educate people about tokenization, bring them at a single place and help them align towards a common goal. But while I was astonished to see the newsletter that you guys are doing, I had one question in mind. What's the content angle that resonates most with the, you know, uh, traditional finance audience versus a crypto native ones? Because when you're educating two different people. One who are not ready to adopt the Excel sheet ones that you rightly mentioned, and the others who have their own standards, too self-righteous, too difficult to collaborate, and sometimes. So, what's the content piece that works well with both of them?
Yeah, it varies. Our audience, you're right. It's both retail and institutional and everyone in between. I think that for the retail people, it's probably going to be either What's Drippin', which is our more kind of like morning brew like newsletter, a little bit more playful. You'll find some memes or gifs in there, trying to break down the concept in easy to understand pieces. Maybe it's a little bit more on the basic side, but at least people are understanding at least the concept of what happened. And we highlight a couple pieces of news there, and a couple other updates. And then we have our Security Token Prime newsletter, which is maybe for your middle people where they understand tokenization. Now we give a little bit more commentary and insight into again pieces of news, but from a more advanced perspective, and thoughts on what it means for the market, etc. We also highlight some data insights in there as well, just from the data that we see of whatever happened that week. Along with our security token show, which gets viewed by Yes Retail. It's on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Music, Spotify, wherever you want to find it. But also, head of innovation at, FINRA and others, large names. and so forth that have told us that they enjoy the podcast and have been watching it for years, and at least it's their rundown on what happened that week. But then for the institutional people, the other end of the spectrum, it's probably going to be a reports where we go a lot more in depth actually into, yes, we use the data that we have, obviously, but we also do qualitative information and research. Again, figuring out, if it's a larger report like the the security tokens report, which encompasses basically the whole industry, it's going to be talking about, big movements, who's working well together, where we see the market moving, et cetera. Or we have other reports that are more asset class specific, like a real estate report, diving really into, again, it's not just residential or commercial real estate, bringing it down a little bit more, different types, mortgage-backed securities, a bunch of other stuff, right? That's going on and what activity is happening there. So institutionals, I think, and naturally so, they're already used to reading larger reports. So that's maybe what they gravitate towards a little bit more.
Summarize what you're saying. While the industry is new, the ways to adoption are old school ways that have been going on for so long. There's nothing new that people have to do to transform, to evolve from their industry, but just educate themselves. These are the kind of reports we have been using to educate ourselves and grow in the industry, right? When we used to see reports by Deloitte, KPMG, and other such companies, that's a similar model that we are working with now. More reports, more the education, and more the adoption eventually, right? So makes perfect sense. So, keep considering this traditional moves that are helping the adoption of this latest technology and emerging tech. uh, there is one other thing that you have been doing, which is something that traditional industries also do, but Web3 has been doing very different. I'm talking about the conference structure. Web3 conferences, while stemming from the traditional conference criteria, but they have a different vibe altogether. And I know that STM has been doing Tokenize this, which has become its flagship conference. Contrary to common belief that conferences are just for networking or pitching your products and development ideas to investors and then getting marketing projects, what is the kind of standout success story that you can share with our audience, like maybe a kind of issuer, investor, or partner that emerged from any of the conference, like any example that can motivate the audience to treat conferences as conferences and not a party event?
Yeah, 100%. I think, well, first of all, crypto native conferences are for sure a blast. They're very fun. But you're also inviting a lot of, again, people that maybe aren't as serious about conducting business. They're there for the fun, or of course, maybe they're fanning over, certain speakers, which is always great. You want to, listen to them, of course, and learn from them. And then you have the opposite end where it's very institutional and it's just, again, I think everyone's aware what that looks like. For us,
Yeah.
really, what we're trying to build is an environment where, and Tokenize this stemmed really from going to other conferences and realizing that there's no real concentration of tokenization content. Maybe one or two, three panels max
They
at other
try, yeah.
conferences, but nothing really getting into it. And so we wanted to build something where the tokenization industry can come into, and finance professionals and crypto natives, to learn, dive deep. And the topics reflect that. Day one tends to be a lot more retail friendly. You're covering the blockchains, you're covering DeFi vaults, some of the fun stuff. And then day two is a lot more institutional, talking about cost efficiencies, cost and operational efficiencies, right? A proof of concept or in production use cases as well, which is always great. But at the end of the day, what Tokenize this is structured to do is to conduct business. So we invite heavy hitters. We invite people that are quality, people that are decision makers. You're no longer waiting in line of 15 people to talk to a speaker. They're right there. They're available. They want to learn, not and network with each other, and not just institution to institution, but also to retail friendly approaches as well, because
Yep.
of course they want to learn from boots on the ground. To answer your question on success stories, I mean, we've heard of some for sure. Not sure which of them I'm allowed to share on, but I'll give an example without the names maybe. So for example, we had an issuer that found the issuance platform that they wanted to go with at Tokenize this 2024. A year later, we saw them actually go live. So it was like, oh, fantastic. And granted, a year later, because there's some missing steps and whatnot, but nonetheless, that happened. That connection happened. An investment from one attendee into another company also happened. Let's see what else. We've seen even just institutions partnering up a bit more that have told us like, hey, we were kind of waiting to book this call for a few weeks from now, and like, and then the follow up, and we're like, nah, we can just hammer it out right now in 15 minutes and call it a day because
Wow.
they're all there. And so it's just been a variety. Like I said, kind of hard to know who I can exactly share on, but what we do see at the end of the day is just business getting done, people having genuine conversations, decision makers being present and active, and that's something we're really proud of, and we just want to keep on growing the opportunity for.
Amazing. And I think that aligns perfectly with what you are building with the RWA DAO structure. This is actual community work that you are doing, right? Even if it's not directly linked with STM, it's helping the industry move forward by making them collaborate in a more constructive environment, having the same. And you rightly mentioned many conferences happen. RWO is obviously a theme in most of the conferences, but it's never a highlight. You don't actually get the quality connections or content that you need. And if you're focused towards RWA, and this tokenize this conference is definitely one place. By the way, where are you having these conferences for the last how many years?
Yeah, 2023 we started it in virtual only. We just wanted to prove that we can put a good agenda together and the people will show up. So 2023 was virtual through Zoom events, and then 2024 we held it in Miami. That's where the company is based, and so just a little bit
Nice.
easier for us logistically and whatnot. Again, not to prove that we can host an in-person collaborative environment. We took lessons from that, but we ultimately realized this year is really exploding with institutionals now
Yep.
understanding this technology, and B, we got feedback in the past, especially from people based out of New York, that were like, hey, or elsewhere, that were like, yeah, we wanted to go, but Miami was just kind of out of reach or whatnot. So we figured, you know what, let's move everything to New York. So Tokenized this was at the Glass House this past year, 2025. Had a great turnout. A lot more institutions, of course, showed up. A little easier for them to take the subway or walk on over. I think that's where we're headed for next year. We want to think repeat New York because it's just at the end of the day kind of the global hub of finance, especially in the U.S. Who
Makes
knows?
sense.
Maybe we explore doing it outside of the U.S. as well. Another edition of
I
Tokenized
was
this.
going
We'll
to ask
see.
that. Yeah. I was going to ask any plans for Token 2049 because all of us, we have been traveling a lot to 2049, especially the Singapore edition. I've been attending it for the last 3 years, and it's amazing the kind of people I see there. Obviously, it's very overcrowded these days. Too many people in crypto, almost hard to believe, but this is what we were working for, right? So I think it has its pros and cons. But definitely, if you do plan to do anything in Token 2049 or something in the Asian continent, count me in. I'll be there.
Yeah, no, for us, I mean, and there's something that people have brought up too is like linking up with other conferences like Token 2049 and others. And while we see value in it, because a lot of people are already there and whatnot, at the end of the day, what we don't want is for Tokenized this to be seen as a side event or whatnot. It's like, no, it's its own standalone conference
Makes
because it
sense.
goes so in depth. But
Yeah.
to answer that though, we are, Dubai might be one of the locations. It could be somewhere in Europe. It could be somewhere, London maybe. We'll have to stay tuned and find out.
Who knows? Maybe the Token 2049 team had a tokenization mindset only. That's why they named it a token, not crypto or Web3 2049. Who knows? Eventually, it also becomes a good partner for that. But yes, I totally understand that. The whole essence of the event is to keep tokenization separate as a big industry that it's becoming, with players like Apollo coming in and JP Morgan coming in. It's definitely where institutions are moving and the world is moving, and definitely makes sense. So, taking a step back, while we are considering the industry as a whole and discussing different possible assets that are there that are being tokenized, I know I saw your experience, and that you have evaluated 100 plus businesses in prior consulting roles. So, what traditional industry verticals, in your experience, you predict will have the next big wave in tokenized assets?
Yeah, I think now that as retail is starting to pick up on this, first they're picking it up through maybe RWA related utility and governance tokens, but they're also starting to understand the actual asset, the tokenized securities part of it. So with that in mind, I think the industries that will do best will probably be anyone that has a strong fan base or member base. So for example, Pressman Films did tokenization on Republic, and Pressman Film is the one that behind like American Psycho and also other big movies, right? And they were essentially tokenizing 3 existing IPs and 3 new ones all together packaged. Obviously, if you've seen American Psycho and you're a fan and you believe in the people behind it, you're probably going to be likely to invest, right? We've also seen Watford FC out, also, they're a soccer club, or football club, also tokenized, right? And so again, it's fan based. Those are loyal fans that want to jump in and have a piece of ownership there. So I think anything like that, or if you're an existing company that's maybe not necessarily fans, but you have loyal customers that you can then offer potential perks to as an owner, right? A part owner, verify on chain that they're a part owner. Maybe they get a discount on something or renewed subscriptions. I don't know, but anything like that, I think will be the probably the most applicable for tokenization right now. At least now that again retail is starting to pick up on it. And then over time, of course, other assets will also make their way on chain. They all have their value proposition as to why. I think, but I'm gearing my answer towards maybe what's going to be the most eye catching and attractive to retail investors.
When I think back on the use cases that I've seen, even though it wasn't a success, but Starbucks trying to tokenize their loyalty program and other such players tokenizing their loyalty programs and now exploring blockchain for loyalty programs, that makes sense because that's the most loyal customers that you have and you're trying to engage them in a regular basis and manage it on scale, which is not easy with traditional systems. Many systems have failed, like Pepsi system and American Express and other travel industry related tokens as well. They were not able to fulfill that scale of customer base, and blockchain might be the answer. Makes sense what you are saying. And I believe one other good aspect of this whole conversation is that when you mention apart from loyal customer base, where the most volume is stable coins, for example, global payments, that's very obvious use case of tokenization if people don't think about it, right? And I think that's the most active one that's been getting adoption. People have been calling 2025 as the year of tokenization, as like stable coins as well. More people are adopting it day by day. And I can't remember, there was some news today as well of stable coins being accepted as a payment method in some big company. Every day there's a news. So that's definitely the most fan base or the most customer base. That's where the magic lies for tokenization. Amazing. Jason, coming to the next question, I was wondering, what, kind of initiatives that STM is doing might excite the audience in the near future. Obviously, we have seen a lot of things till now and, the prediction for the near future. But what are something that you can share with the audience that they should keep an eye out? They should track what STM is doing, any tool, data set, partnership. What is something that might excite the audience?
Yeah, no, a variety of things for sure. The first one is, STM.co. We launched it in beta back in a month ago, at Tokenize This. Market.com is still live. That's our, for reference, if anyone wants to go check that out, that's where everything is available and you can plug in as we migrate everything over. But I would say keep an eye on stm.co though, because that's where we're moving to. It's a brand new interface with a lot more features and tools coming to you soon, whether it's the preset tabs where you can easily filter out, different ecosystems or charts that you'll eventually be able to customize yourself, or eventually have portfolio trackers and a bunch of other things I can't even share yet. So, but there's going to be a lot of innovation happening and tools, like I said, for the users on stm.co to really get a full picture, a customized picture of what their holdings are, what their assets are, and so forth, and what they want to see. We also have the RWA Foundation that we've managed as well, which is essentially, well, as the name implies, a foundation for the RWA industry. And so you'll see our 30 plus partners, starting to work together on solving some real world problems, as well as for the individual members. You can join us on Telegram. There's going to be a DAO, the Wally DAO, that will also be coming soon and reaching TGE. We did share that it will be on Solana and with our partners that are working and so forth. So keep an eye on Wally DAO as well. A little bit more for the crypto natives. And Wally Fest will be happening later this year in Miami. Some more details to come there.
Amazing. No, definitely I'm planning to join Walidao soon. There is one interesting tokenization use case that I'm working on with one of the top cooperative societies in India. It's third largest cooperative society in India, and we are planning to build a tokenization of the produce that they capture as well as the society that they have, tokenize good behavior, loyalty points, and all of that. So I'm intending to join Walidao soon, as soon as that thing comes up. I figure it out in terms of details. But so stm.co definitely is a place for people to check out. But let's say if we have to keep an eye out for the news, which is the first platform that you use to announce such kind of news? It's the newsletter, the event conference, the podcast, or some PR. What do you use first?
Ooh, well, it depends on which news you're referring to, because it depends on the time of the week. Mondays is our newsletter, Security Token Prime Insights, where we cover basically everything from the past week and anything that might have been mentioned over the weekend. So that's gonna be your freshest there. Then you have what's dripping on Wednesdays, which will highlight something from early that week. You know, we just dropped one today, so we covered news that came out yesterday, right? So that's as fresh as it'll probably get from one of our publications. Aside from, of course, follow us on X and LinkedIn. And then last but not least, of course, the Security Token Show, which is the culmination of all news that happened that week, commentary, interviews as well, featuring some heavy hitters and people building in the space. So, like I said, it depends on when that piece of news came out and how recent you want to have it. So, kind of just follow all of them.
So whichever day of the week you are seeing, there's some way to get the best news of RWA out there from STM, and you just have to be all omnipresent, I'll say, in the ecosystem.
Exactly right.
Amazing. Perfect. Great. So I was really glad to have you today at the podcast, Jason. While we are getting towards the end of the podcast, there is one last question that I have, and it's kind of a two questions converted into one. While there are many CFOs that I've been working with for different purposes, there is always one question that stands out: how exactly do we get into tokenization? Why we should configure it, right? And while I know the answer is not that simple, even if we try to put it in one single paragraph, it still won't quench their thirst. What is the best resource out there that you would recommend to such CFOs or financial executives who are curious about blockchain and curious about tokenization for their digital assets? Any book, podcast, any newsletter besides STM, of course. So, what's the best resource you would recommend?
Great question. Yeah. Well, of course, do have to give a slight shout out though to my partners that wrote Blockchain Explained. It's a book that kind of just explains it. It's on Amazon. But aside from that, you're asking for other sources. There are great podcasts out there. Bankless does a phenomenal job of having great speakers on there and kind of diving into the weeds. Laura Shin also has her Unchained podcast that has been going on for a while now. I'm sure people will subscribe to you as well, especially as you bring on even more guests, right? And then last but not least, on the newsletter side, I would say maybe like Crypto for Advisors that CoinDesk does. They always have, and then that's specifically for like financial advisors and type. So talking about maybe new trends, whether it's crypto or tokenization, we see both topics getting hit on. Again, how it relates to that. There's also an Ask an Expert section where they have some quick Q&A in there that could answer some of the questions that CFOs or RIAs might have. So yeah, those are kind of the main recommendations.
Amazing, amazing. That I think covers a lot of good news outlets or places to connect. So again, thank you so much, Jason, for picking out the time today. I think this was great. The insights that you shared really will help a lot of people listening to this podcast. Just to clarify, we have a lot of young audience and a good mix of Web2 audience as well. That has joined us in the past. A lot of universities where we have set up center of excellences and helping students understand more, latest technologies and trends in the industry. I'm sure your insights you shared with us will help them a long way to explore tokenization in a safe manner, in a more directed manner, understanding all the nuances of the industry. I'm really thankful for you to be here today and wish you a great day ahead.
Armand, thank you so much for having me. It's been a great conversation. Yeah, some good questions. It's been a pleasure. And for anyone that does need a resource, don't feel afraid to reach out. We're very collaborative, and we like to provide as much value as we can to really grow the industry. And that starts with education. So thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jason.